negotiation from a chaos theory perspective. We're going to look at the alchemy of change, the way things change, and we're going to look at the negotiating process and negotiating techniques, hopefully within that context. And what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and fit the techniques that I'm going to talk to you about in a framework that basically works according to the system that we've developed in the book, which is enhance, perturb, attract, excite. The change process itself goes from control, where a system is stable and in control, right through to a point where the system displays scientific chaos, which is the structured order which is deep within a self-organizing system, and goes back again. Let's assume that the system is in equilibrium. It's before the start of a negotiation. What we're going to try and do is look at some of the aspects of the negotiation and put them in this context. So at the moment the system is in equilibrium or in a state of balance. Towards the end of the negotiation, if the negotiation is successful, the system will begin to transform back into a higher form of order. This is the lens, the EPAE lens that we developed, Joe Rubens and I developed in 1997 as a description of how things change. In the original model, which was based around how to transform an organization, we said that the transformation was anchored around customer value, but I think it's more about values of agreement. So let's, for now, let's assume that our negotiation is going to happen essentially around the things that we agree upon. Negotiation is not about disagreement, okay? Negotiation is about what we agree upon. And so, also, you cannot negotiate the past. The past is gone. Whoever wins writes the history books. Although what I'm going to teach you will enable you to be more effective in a win-lose situation, that's also called distributive bargaining, where things are shared or distributed out. But essentially, over time, in the long term, professional negotiation, you're always in a win-win scenario. Now, I used to be a wage negotiator for Kodak many years ago when I was a young guy, my first really executive job. What was happening in the 2-year period that I was there was different people were coming into my office in the first couple of months, and I was doing various types of negotiation. But then after a couple of months, the same people were coming back into my office with other issues, okay? And basically, the context of a negotiation, it would not have been in my best interests to try and put those people out of business. It would not be in my best interest to really drive such a hard bargain that they, when they went back to their own constituency, were fired or were not able to implement the agreement, okay? So when you're talking about professional negotiations, because actually the professional world is always quite a small world, you'll get a reputation. You're always in a long-term win-win situation. So you negotiate in order to keep the other person alive, and in order to keep the other person, or to enable them to go back to their own organization and sell the agreement to their own organization. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Okay, so long-term negotiations you're always in a win-win scenario. Okay, well, one of the first things you can do to enhance your position before you start is prepare. In the textbooks, it's called a BATNA. I like to call it Plan B. You prepare Plan B. BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if we can't get a deal from these people, what are we going to do? Okay. Now, if you've worked out your BATNA, if you know what you're going to do and they don't know what they're going to do, you are in a stronger position. Okay, you're in a much more strong position because you're not hungry. If they don't know what they're going to do, then they will be afraid of not being able to come to some kind of deal with you. Okay, so most professional negotiators will already, they have a BATNA. They know what their plan B is going to be if we can't get a deal from you. It's like you never go to a bank manager, you don't never borrow money off a bank manager when you need money. Banks will never lend you money when you need money. Okay? A bank will lend you money when you don't need money. And it's a simple rule of communications. Moravian's rule, 55% of your communication is in body language. 38% of communication is in tone of voice, and only 7% of communication is in words. That's some research that was done a long time ago in communications. So in other words, what you communicate with your body and with your tone of voice is far more important than what you communicate in words. And essentially, negotiation, in my experience, has a very powerful spiritual dimension to it. Okay, there's a point in negotiation where you could say it's a contest of wills, but it's also it's about you preparing yourself spiritually to go into this. It's like a warrior going into battle. They go through rituals. They bathe and they dress, and they also, fishermen, actors, theatre people, media people, people that deal with change for a living. They pack their equipment in a particular way. They have rituals, and they can. So, like me, I'm a musician. I pack my guitar in a certain way. I put all my things in there so that if I'm on a blackened stage with no lights, before I go on, I can unpack my gear in the dark. Okay, and essentially, people who go into change or who deal with change professionally develop certain kinds of rituals. It's a kind of a preparation for the spirit, but it's also very practical as well. And so I think one of the disciplines for you is to make sure that you don't go into that negotiation hungry. And if you've got other options, if you've got your plan B and plan C, then your body language, your tone of voice, the way you conduct yourself, eye contact, all that kind of stuff will automatically take care of itself. Okay, so that's one of the first rules then of negotiation, is you prepare your BATNA. You get together with your team and you work out what are we going to do if we can't get a deal. Good. Second thing is you should find out who's going to be there. Okay, and you should do your homework. Essentially, you do not want to negotiate with the office boy unless you have to. It's very common for companies to send in people who've got no decision-making power, particularly if you're going to deal with North Korea or China or Japan. They send in people for the first round of negotiations who've got no decision-making power. But they can say no to you, but they can't say yes to you. Okay? So one of the first things you want to establish when you're going into a negotiating situation or a selling situation is, am I talking to the right person? Okay? Or can you tell me what's your basically you could say, how do you fit into the organization? Could you show me how you fit into the organogram? Is there anybody else here who might be interested in what we have to say? And if they say, oh yes, Mr. Jones he signs all the checks, then you immediately stop negotiating if you can, and you say, can we invite Mr. Jones to come and be with us? Okay, and if it's yes, fine, then you can start negotiating. But if it's no, then you try to reschedule your meeting to the point where you've got the actual decision maker there. Okay, because this office boy, who you do not offend, of course, okay, they have the power to say, they can say no to you, but they can't say yes to you. Do you take the point? Understand what I mean? So the office boy, you know, you can, if you, not just negotiating, imagine you go to a company doing a cold sell. Walk in and you show your prospectus and you show your product to people who, you know, the first people you meet in the company, and they say, no, I don't think we're really interested in that. That's it, you're dead. Okay? Now, so in a selling situation, you want to know that you're actually making a presentation to the decision maker. Sometimes you can't do that, and negotiators, multicultural negotiators, often are office boys. Bill Richardson, who's the famous American negotiator, dealt with Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, and people like that. He was an office boy. Okay, Bill Richardson did not have, or does not have, the power to make decisions, but he's a channel to the White House. So anything that's said to him, if you read the handout I gave you on Bill Richardson, okay, anything that's said to Bill Richardson will get through to the White House. So that's his lever. Okay, but the reason why companies or organizations send in low-level people often is to find out what you want. They want to spot your guns. What they're looking for, essentially, is to find out your targets. Because in the context of negotiation, virtually social rules are turned upside down. Everything that comes out of your mouth in a negotiation is potentially a target. When I negotiate as part of my business, I try not to be the first one to talk about money. Okay? Because I know in a hard negotiation, if I'm busy with the money, and what's the money, you know, then people then know that I need money. So it's a sign of weakness. Okay? And potentially everything that comes out of your mouth is a potential target for them. So you should be very disciplined in what you say and what members of your team say, whilst at the same time trying to get as much information about them as possible. So they send in low-level people to find out where we call it spotting your guns, you know. And in the old wars, they used to send in, the cavalry would send in a small patrol, would go into the kill zone. They'd go where the guns could fire, and then the guns would be firing up on the hill, and the officers up on the hill would be able to see the flashes, and they'd know where the guns were. Then they'd train their own artillery on those guns. You know, and they might lose a few men, very gallant, charge of the light brigade, all that kind of stuff, but they spot the guns, they see where the guns are. It's a fairly common tactic in war. Okay, and that's what happens when you send in the office boys. The office boys then find out what you want. They see the flashes. They see basically what your weaknesses are. Okay, then they know how to construct their strategy, because they're your buttons and they're going to press them. I've still got a few more things I want to say about the enhanced phase before we move over to perturbation. Okay. Now, one of the things is, as I said before, negotiation is about what we agree upon. Okay. One of the first things we both agree upon is to get together and to actually sit down and meet and talk to each other, to agree, to disagree agreeably, as Dr. Stephen Covey puts it. Okay, so we agree to sit across the table and to talk to each other, and that can take. I talk about the Israel-Palestine situation, Ariel Sharon, and what's his name again?
Arafat.
Mr. Arafat. Sorry, I always forget his name. Mr. Arafat. The pair of them, those two men hated each other so much they couldn't be in the same room together, and so there was no possibility of coming to any kind of negotiated settlement or agreement while they were both in power. Okay, now they're both gone, and now there is a chance that the negotiators for that situation will come together. And the first things they will do when they sit together is the Israelis will say, why are you here? And the Palestinians will say, we want to be able to conduct our normal lives again. We want the walls to come down, we want to get our land back, and we want our children not to be killed as collateral damage in Israeli airstrikes. Okay? And the Israelis, and then the Israelis say, well, we're here because we don't want our children to go out on a Saturday night to a discotheque and get blown to pieces by a suicide bomber. You know what I mean? So we both agree. Do we both agree? We both want that to stop. Okay? So the first thing that we agree upon is we both want that to stop. So, and we're here now to try and figure out a way to make that happen. Okay? So it's long-term win-win. That's what we're here for. Okay? You can apply the same logic to business. You want a particular thing for a deal, we want a particular thing. So identifying what people want is part of the first base agreement. Let's digress a little bit more, because there's more, we can get more information before a negotiation around this particular kind of idea. I think it took 2 years for President Nixon's negotiators to bring the Vietnam War to a kind of conclusion. And one of the things that was interesting, it took 2 years for the Americans to persuade the Vietnamese to come and sit at the table and start to negotiate. Okay, so that's first base. And I read somewhere in The Economist, I think, one of the things that was on the agenda was the shape of the table. It was the location, where it's going to be, so the place was part of it, but also even the way people were going to sit. And what the Vietnamese wanted, so the Vietnamese wanted to meet in Paris, and they wanted that shape of table. Now that's really interesting, I think. The furniture, or the layout of the space, actually gives you extra information. So I'm a consultant sometimes, apart from being a lecturer. I make my product in my client's office. So I create my product in his office. Okay. You are a consultant, you've arrived as a consultant when you feel comfortable in another person's boardroom. That's what they say. So that's where you work, that's where I make my product. Now, the layout of the actual kind of the way they do things in their business or in their office or on their premises gives you a lot of information. Let me give you an example. An old British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, had to negotiate with the French in the 70s. Macmillan wrote in his memoirs, as soon as I walked into, it was in Paris, as soon as I walked into the room that the French had chosen, I knew we were in for a fight. And the French had chosen they'd chosen a room in one of their palaces, a long room with a long table, and all the way down the table were flags, French flags, you know, the little things they have, I'm sure you've seen them. And on the other side were British flags, so each person had a flag. And of course the prime ministers, or the power people, started in the centre and kind of got less powerful as you went down the ranks. Okay, so it was very hierarchical. But Macmillan said, as soon as I walked into that room, he said, I knew we were in for a fight, because he saw this, that they were lined up facing each other. Okay, and he also said, and of course, in the room they'd chosen, all around the walls were these great oil paintings of French battle victories. You know, so in other words, the French, mostly over the British actually, Napoleon. The French had chosen a war room in order to be the room where they were going to meet and do the negotiation. Okay, so they'd chosen a war room. So Macmillan, it tells you a lot. Let me tell you about furniture, okay? Because this you won't find in a book. This is to do with, I call it space, okay? So enhance also is a kind of an aspect of space. When we have we had a family dinner last week. We had a family dinner last week, right? My family are all Flemish. Some of them speak English, but most of them are not very comfortable with English. When we have a family dinner, I always sit here. So I try to be the first one to sit down. And I will sit down first, and then whoever wants to speak English that night, they're free to sit wherever they like. Anybody who wants to speak English, that's the English zone. So I don't force myself on a group of people where they have to speak English. You know, I go first and sit down, and then whoever comes and sits down around me is there because they want to sit next to me and speak English. Okay? First rule. Second thing is, if you are in a negotiation, sit down first. Whoever sits opposite you has got something for you. Anybody who sits facing you has got something for you. You know, like if you go to dinner with your girlfriend or with your wife, your girlfriend will not allow you to sit that way. My wife won't, okay? My wife wants to sit there. People who love you or people who hate you will sit and face off you. So what you should do is sit down first. And then if it's team against team, see who sits opposite you. If someone sits opposite you, facing you, they've got something for you. When I teach my MBA classes, my big MBA classes, not like this one, where I've only got 3 students in this group, okay? But when I've got a lot of students, I arrange the furniture in a U shape. And that's me. I'm very interested in who sits there. Not particularly interested in who sits there, but I get to know the names of the people who sit there. Not the first week. Second week, they will have all changed. They'll have all moved positions. Round about the third week, the group will have settled down, and then I want to know the names of the people. Well, I know the names of the people who sit there. People who sit directly opposite me either love what I've got to say or they hate what I've got to say. You know, it's people who wish to challenge the ideas or whatever, or people who tend to agree. So people who've got strong feelings for each other tend to sit facing each other. Okay, remember that. In my experience as a consultant, people try to make deals orally. If I walk into someone else's boardroom and if pens and paper are laid out on the tables for the negotiation, prior to the start of the negotiation, so if there's pens and paper laid out, generally in my experience, you can believe what people say, you can trust what people say, you can trust people are going to do what they say they're going to do. If they've got a culture of writing things down. But if, on the other hand, you walk into their boardroom and the boardroom table is free of all ways of taking notes, then I wouldn't believe a word they say. If they don't have a habit of writing things down, okay, same when you're negotiating with people, if you try to be the one who's taking the notes, because at the end of the negotiation, you've got to think, you know, think the thing right the way through. Think with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says. At the end of a meeting or a negotiation, the last thing you're going to do is you're going to, well, around here, you're going to agree what we agree. That's okay, so the negotiation is over. Let's agree what we've agreed. Let's agree what we've agreed. That's going to be quite deep in the process of change. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at whoever's been taking the notes. I see it with students all the time. Groups of students go off to do projects and things, I learn the names of the students who are in the group, might be the quiet girl in the group, taking all the notes for everybody. Because at the end of the meeting, everyone looks at her and says, okay, so what have we got? And she can say, you said that, you said that, you said that. And this is what we all agreed. And, you know, and that was at 3:20. And everybody says, fine. And she can actually interpret that information. So the writing down, people who write things down, people write things down for detail. We use written form of communication for detail, accuracy, and to keep a record. And those are the kind of people I believe, and those are the kind of people I trust, people who write stuff down. But if they don't do that, if they don't write stuff down, don't believe a word they say, and you then say, is it okay if I keep notes for us all? And you keep the notes. Because when you get round to this stage, the final attack stage, then that will give you a lot of power. Okay? Because you're the one with got all the details written out. The first one to speak loses. Strange rule, right? The first one to speak loses. He meant hello. They meant hello. Okay? This is not widely known either. Okay? But essentially, you walk into that situation, you walk into the negotiation, you keep that shut. You've got two of these, and you've got one of them. You keep that shut. You walk in, and you and your team, you walk in a very disciplined way. And I'm talking about 1 second, 2 seconds of silence before they say, hello. And then it's hello. Okay? Then it's hello. Remember I tell you, negotiation is a matter of spirit. Okay? It's a thing about spirit. And just try it next time you've got a job interview. Okay? Keep your mouth shut. Let them say the first hello. And then with the rest of the team, you look at each other like that. Once they've said hello and you've done all the pleasantries, everybody first strike to us. Okay? Essentially, as a negotiator, you've got two weapons, and you should be very careful about them. The first one you've got is silence. I'll talk about the second one in a bit. You perturb like this. You get the point? If you want to get everybody's head up in the room, if you're giving a presentation, don't shout. Do what I just did. Okay? Silence. You know, if I just look at you for 2 minutes, it's very perturbing. Eh? In this book, this fabulous book, I love this guy. So, employees first, customers second. Vineet Nayar is making a presentation to his top decision makers, a couple of hundred people. Okay, and he says, "Okay, now I want your feedback." You know, so I've done. Now I want to hear from you. And he describes in here 2 minutes before somebody raises their hand and speaks. Have you ever stood in front of a group of people for 2 minutes of silence? He gave them 2 minutes silence. He kept his mouth shut for 2 minutes until somebody spoke. And I think that's fantastic. He wanted to empower people. You empower people with silence. If God wants to speak to us, God will speak to us. If God wants us to have our own voice, she speaks to us in silence. That's what we call a paradox. By speaking to us in silence, we have our own voice. You empower people with silence. Okay, you do that in management as well. You empower people by keeping out of the way or under-managing. That's the paradox. If God spoke to us with his voice, you know, if a big voice came out of the sky, we'd be struck dumb. It would take away our voice. Okay? So remember that with your kids when you're raising your kids. Listen to your kids. Certainly twice as much as you talk at them. Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in God?
Of course. Of course.
Do you believe in life after death?
Yeah.
Do you think there's life in space?
No.
No?
Really. Yeah.
Not really? Okay. What's interesting, gentlemen, is not the answers that you gave. When somebody asks you a question, like I just did, when somebody nails you like that, you know, do you believe in God? You know, I could say, well, do you think we'll ever go on to the gold standard? Do you think the world economy will ever go? I can say that to students, you know, and kind of, they'll say, yes, or no, and they don't even know what I'm talking about, okay? What I'm saying to you is, when someone fires a direct question at you like that, it's very hard to just look at them. That's a very interesting question, Professor. Why did you ask me that? That's also an answer. You know? Real communication only occurs between equals. If someone fires a question at you, essentially they're on a power trip. If you buy that question and you try to answer that question, I've got control of your mind for the next 10 or 20 seconds. See what I'm saying? So you've got two weapons. You've got silence and you've got questioning. Questioning basically gives you control, and it's devastating. It's a devastating strategy. So the other thing you should be doing at this enhanced stage with your team is preparing your list of questions to fire at the opponent. You try and anticipate what you think they want, what are they likely to ask for, and then you construct a whole battery of questions. Because if I can get you answering my question, if you think of it like a bit like sword fighting, if I can get you answering my question, if I can get you answering my question, I've got you on the back foot. You're on the defense, and I'm on the attack. Okay, but it doesn't seem like that. It appears to be quite normal. So questioning is a really very important weapon. But you should understand that silence is actually a very good answer. If someone asks you a question in negotiation, take your time. And then ask them a question back. Very good. Very interesting question, Professor. Why did you ask me that? What do you think of this lecture so far? Okay.
I think it's a great lecture.
You think it's a great lecture? Okay. Do you notice what he did? He looked at you.
Not really.
Yeah. If you've got, this is something else about questioning, okay? These are dirty tricks, but they're fun, you know. It's, questioning is like, negotiation is like a kind of a sport, you know? It's fun. It's a sport. If I've got a big bunch of students and I ask that question to the guy at the back who's like that, excuse me, Mr. Jones at the back there. Everybody giggling, you know. Mr. Jones, what do you think of this lecture so far? And you see him going, you see Mr. Jones going boom, 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 like that, boing, boing, boing. And then, but what you also see is everybody else in the class turns around and does what he did and looks at you. So everybody will turn and look at Mr. Jones, you know, and Mr. Jones will go, you see the veins standing out, right? You know what I mean? So questioning also enables you to split their team. So if you're negotiating against a team, and they've got one guy there, maybe a guy who's a real pain in the neck, you know, one of those guys, you know, somebody who even their own people don't like. This is a beautiful way to win friends on their side, by just saying, excuse me, Harry, what's your take on this so far? I want to hear Harry, because I want to know what you think about this, Harry. What's your position on this? And how does that relate to such and such, Harry? Just Harry. Harry, tell me, what's your position here? And you watch Harry, and Harry will start talking, but you'll see Harry's own people turn, because they love it. They love to see how Harry handles it. And you'll see them all kind of sit there and kind of watch Harry to see how Harry gets out of it. And you'll see Harry going pink, and you'll see the veins standing up on his neck. Questioning is a fantastic behavioral tool. Okay? But these are simple behaviors. You, as a negotiator, want to come across as a person first and a negotiator second. And this, so don't come across formally with the business cards and, you know, I am such and such, I am the marketing manager of such and such a company, and I represent blah, blah, blah. When I get people doing that to me as a negotiator, then I know that I can probably play with their feet, as the Flemish say, okay? People who come across formally in that way, in a negotiating situation, tend not to have a lot of experience. People who are very good in negotiations, you don't even know that they're negotiating. My old boss, Frank Haywood, the guy who said, the first one to speak loses. You see him in a negotiation, you don't even know if he's negotiating. Frank's laughing and joking all the time. You know, I'm not talking about being liked, but I'm talking about a negotiation is also about relationships. It's about building relationships, and there's nothing wrong with walking into the situation and talking about family, talking about friends, talking about the weather, talking about what you did last night. People who come across informally have a good chance of making some kind of relationship. Relationship starts to emerge kind of around here. If you don't know the people in the negotiation, during the course of your meeting, you might have conflict. Conflict is one of the best ways I know to build trust. Really weird. It's a kind of a contradiction. If I've had a fight with someone, or if I've kind of had a good argument with somebody, I know who they are. I see we say in English, I see him on his metal. You know, I see him in his military gear. I see who he really is. I see what kind of a guy he really is, if I've had a fight with him. And I know then. It gives me a basis of respect. It's an opportunity for respect, to win respect, and also to give respect, and it also builds trust. Conflict does not come, trust does not come out of happy families. You know, trust is not, here we are, all friends being here now, isn't it lovely? You know, that's not trust. That's that series that we saw on the TV called The Office. Was that kind of trust. Real trust comes from disagreement, open, frank exchange of views. Okay, it's a kind of a paradox. So, but the way in which conflict is expressed and the way it's aired is also quite an interesting thing. Essentially, only one person can be angry in a negotiation, and you should make sure that it's not you. Showing your feelings to a certain extent depends on how much you trust people. Okay. There was a situation in the 70s where Mr. Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, was in the United Nations with he took his shoe off and he's banging his shoe on the table really angry. He was blue with anger, you know. And there's a situation described in the handout that you've got where Bill Richardson, the negotiator for America, is in, I think he's in Nigeria, and he's just going to start the negotiation, and a general jumps up on the table and starts shouting at him and screaming at him, you know, je suis pas un thug. I don't like America calling me a thug.
The general is from
One of the generals, a Nigerian general, Abacha. I remember his name.
Abacha?
Abacha.
Yeah,
Was-
yeah, he
yeah?
was our former president.
Okay, there's
He
Abacha,
died.
and
He's
Abacha
very
had a
good.
general,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
it might have been Abacha.
He,
But-
he was a former general. He was a general. He was a general.
Okay, well, I think it was,
Also
I think
our
I'll need to check on my
ex-president.
details on that. But there was, it
He
was
died-
either Abacha or it was Abacha's general was on the table, and he's spitting and shouting at Bill Richardson. Okay, now Bill Richardson's in a suit. He doesn't have any army with him. He's got no soldiers with him. He's not weaponed. He's not carrying a gun. And there's guys like all around the room with AK-47s, you know, under the control of this general. The general's got a gun on his hip, and he's shouting his head off at Bill Richardson, you know. So what do you do when someone's angry, when someone's being really aggressive like that, right? Bill Richardson, according to the report you've got, right, he turns to the president while the guy is spitting at him, and he says, I don't think he likes me very much. You know, the president starts laughing because it's outrageous. You know, it's ridiculous. The guy could kill him. He just, you know, he could easily do that. But the president starts
Can do
laughing.
that.
Okay, and then the president says, "Okay, you know, well, I've forgotten the guy's name now, but okay, we get the message. Sit down, sit down." And then he turns. Then he's mates with Richardson. So in other words, when someone does get angry, it's an opportunity for you either to win some respect,
Yeah.
okay? It's also an opportunity for you to get information as well. So when you're in this, you're in this chaos phase here, the thing is moving. When there's serious conflict, when people get upset, first thing people do when they get angry is they go to the extremes. Okay, they become what's called protopathic. Right? In other words, everything suddenly becomes all bad or all good, all black or all white, all right or all wrong. They go to the extremes. First thing people do when they get upset, they lose their critical faculties. They can't make a judgment anymore. It's either one thing or the other. Okay? Protopathic. So don't try to deal with that by being reasonable. Okay? What you should do when someone is doing that is you should actually, you've got two of these, you hunker down and you listen to what they're saying, what they're shouting at you, and then you paraphrase it back to them. You say back to them in a very kind of gentle way, whoa, Harry. So what I'm hearing, Harry, am I hearing you right? You're getting upset because of this, this, and this. So in other words, you show Harry that you're hearing what he's saying, okay? By repeating it back very gently to him, right? What I'm hearing you say is this, this, and this. Is that right, Harry? And you'll see Harry kind of looking at you in a kind of a funny way because he's not used to people listening to him. None of us are, okay? And you say, Harry, I don't understand why you're getting so kind of worked up about this, you know? And then you see Harry, well, if you knew this new guy who's just coming into our firm, if I go back to him with that kind of agreement, I'm dead, Robin. You know, Harry, I'm really sorry. Who's this new guy? I didn't know about that, this guy. You know, tell me about him. Oh, it's a new guy who's coming into the division, blah, 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 blah. It's not official yet, but so in other words, when people get upset or get angry, not only do they become protopathic, they also give away information. They're more likely to say things they wouldn't say if they were cool. That's why I say only one person can be angry. Make sure it's not you. And how you conduct yourself in the face of an angry man or an angry woman is an opportunity for you to win respect from everybody else, including people on their side. So you see that kind of thing happening in a negotiation as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to win information, and it's an opportunity for you to show everybody just what you're made of. So we've got silence, we've got questioning, And, as you very rightly put in your paper, listening, paraphrase. Paraphrasing is saying back to someone what you've just heard them say. It's also called active listening. So you've got three very powerful weapons there. You've got silence, you've got questioning, and you've got active listening. And they are very perturbing. I think we've certainly got the perturb stage pretty well nailed down. The system is there'll be lots of disagreements, etc., but eventually, if you have certain rules, like we agree to disagree, or people will not leave until we've found an agreement or whatever, so you can actually set the rules at the beginning here, because you know you're going to go through this phase, right? And then, but then new ideas and so on will start to emerge. You listen to people, chords will strike, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do, there's a couple more points I'm going to give you, but I'll be going over a few of the points now also that I've given you. So, first thing, these are 9 specific behaviors. First one, as I've said, silence. First one to speak loses. Keep your mouth shut. Don't raise, every issue you raise can be taken as a sign of weakness. Okay, so don't come across hungry, otherwise they'll press your buttons. You're showing them your buttons, okay? You're showing your guns. Begin with respectful, disciplined silence. You do, and their team. Most people don't know the silence rule, so let them speak first. And see what the difference it makes to you. It makes a hell of a difference to your spirit. Do it when you go for a job interview. If you've learned nothing from me, learn that today, okay? Go in there with your mouth closed. Expect them to make the first move. Do not be rushed, okay? If you go to China, one of the first questions I was out a few years back in Shanghai, studied Chinese negotiating techniques. One of the first questions they'll ask you if you go out there is, when is your plane back? Because we'd like to pick you up by car and bring you back. So you might arrive on the Monday, and then you're going to go back out on Thursday morning, or Thursday lunchtime, you're flying back out, you know, and they'll say, great, well, we'll arrange for a car to take you on Thursday, blah, blah, blah. And now, today, of course, we don't work. Today, you have to come and see the sightseeing, you have to meet these people, and tonight we have a banquet in your honor, you know. So the first night you'll be out there, and you'll have to drink. The only excuse for not drinking is bad health. But for the rest, you have to drink, and the way they drink is one of them will raise the glass, and you got to empty it. You know, there's all different drinking cultures, customs as well in negotiation. So drinking customs as well. But what the Chinese will do is and then on the Tuesday you get up and you have a head like that if you don't know what you're doing, and then it'll be more visits, etc. They might not start the negotiation till Wednesday afternoon, or even the Thursday morning when you actually sit down to do the negotiation. So, in other words, what they're going to do is they're going to put time pressure on you. You can't go back to your company after an expensive trip to China with nothing. So you're going to be much more likely to agree to things. So if people are going to do that, if you suspect people are going to put time pressure on you, then you agree the agenda before you go. So you work out what your agenda is going to be if you think you're going to be in that kind of a situation. Okay? So don't be rushed. And as you know, you're free to answer with silence or to take breaks. So if someone asks you a question, it's always good actually. You go for a job interview and somebody asks you a question. Interesting question. 2 to 3 heartbeats. If you're going to make a presentation to a group of people, come out, nail your feet to the floor if it's a formal presentation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Blah, 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 blah. A little bit of silence before you speak, in my experience, gives your words much more authority. Also, it gives you thinking time. Okay? Silence is a beautiful. I'm a musician. Half of the musical score is silence, and it's written in the music. We write the silent periods in. The silence is as important as the music in music, and it's just the same with negotiation. Okay? It's a very cultural thing, so silence also. Okay, now the second point I haven't mentioned to you, so this is a new one. Most people assume, I'm not going to put it on this board, I'll put it on this one. Is this on camera?
Yes.
Right. So most people assume that the more arguments you give to a thing, the stronger your case. Most people assume that negotiation is a matter of logic, reason, fairness, and other such kind of assumptions. So they assume that if you give one reason, then another reason, then another reason, then another reason, that makes your arguments stronger. If you remember, everything comes out of your mouth as a target. The more reasons you give, the more opportunities you give me to question. Okay? So what I try to do, your strategy in a negotiation is, you say, okay, why have you brought me here? We're here to negotiate. What are your reasons for making your request? And then they say, well, there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And you say, what? You've brought me all this way, so active listening, and your reasons are, am I hearing you right? This, this, and this. Is that what you're saying? You brought me all this way for that. Is that all you have? And they say, no, no, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. So then, back to active listening. So you brought me all this way from England to negotiate with you for that reason, that one, and now you've just added this, this, and that reason. Are they the only reasons you have? And they'll say, no, 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 and there's this, and there's that, and there's this, so, and that's what I'm waiting for. So then they start digging into the barrel, and then there's that reason, that reason. Do you notice the reasons are getting smaller, they're getting weaker, until eventually that point comes up. Aha! Did I just hear you say that, that particular point? How does that relate to our contract of 1997, and I'm thinking subsection 4, paragraph 15? As I remember, that expressly forbids that particular condition. I'm sorry, if that's your argument, I'm afraid we have to reject your case. That's how you do it. But in other words, you try, educated people think the more reasons you give, the cleverer you are, like answering questions, okay? And also, they think it gives more weight to your argument. Well, it doesn't. In a negotiation, it dilutes your argument. You add water to your wine every time you make more points. So when you do your big negotiation next week, 1 or 2 big points from you. And for the rest, you hide the rest. Your team hides the rest. And you try and draw out all their reasons. Until you get down, eventually they're bringing reasons out, thinking they're making the case stronger. And it's like going into a barrel of apples, and then eventually they get to the bottom of the barrel, and they bring out a really rotten one. Prepare your list of questions, not your argument. Questioning, as I've said, gives you control and space. It can put group pressure on them, as I demonstrated to you when I asked you, what did you think of this lecture? Okay, so you can actually confront somebody, put group pressure on. You try to draw out all their arguments. Are there any other reasons? Is that all you have? In order to find the weak ones. And most people will give you more and more because they think the more you give, the stronger your case. No. The more you give, the more targets you present. Okay. Always answer a question with a question. Okay. Professional negotiators will say things like, whoa, we're not answering that question, Robin. We've already answered 3 of your questions. It's time now for you to answer one of ours. Robin, no. What's your view on this? Okay, so you answer a question with a question. So negotiators will negotiate whose turn it is to answer whose question. That's very well known as a tactic. Number 4 is quite interesting. I do it all the time. Negotiations, group negotiations, can be very kind of chaotic. Okay, and simply just announcing what you're going to do before you do it. So announce your behavior before you do it. It makes you look totally transparent. It makes you look very simple, but it's like this, you know, it's like all the noise, you know. Excuse me, at this point, I would like to make a proposal, you know, and then you'll see the noise go like that, goes down. Can I make a proposal, please? May I make a proposal? Yeah? Okay. So then we'll be interested in taking 20 of your items at a 15% discount. Can you tell me how you view that? Okay. So announce what you're going to do before you do it. Okay. Or if they make a proposal, so they say, you know, we will let you have 20 items at a 15% discount. You say, is this a proposal from you? Are you making a proposal to us, like in all the noise? Are you making? Okay, this is something I would like us all to discuss. What I'm hearing you say is, you will supply 20 of this item at a 15% discount. Am I hearing you right? Yeah? Okay. Can you tell me, please, what's the basis of your figures here? Where are you getting these numbers from? So immediately with a question. Okay? So go in, you answer it with a question. But what I'm doing first to get order in the room is, you're making a proposal. Am I hearing you? Okay. This is something I would like us now to discuss. Can you please tell me, and then what's the basis of your figures on this? Or tell me about your cost base. Okay. So you go in with a question so that you've always got them, as far as possible, on the back foot. Okay, that's what questioning gives you. And that announcing what you're going to do, your behavior looks very simple. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Just something like that is a very powerful intervention in a group, but it makes you look like a normal guy. You should, as I say, you come across as a person first and a negotiator second. Present yourself as an amateur. Okay, amateur is also a way, of course. I'm not talking about being liked. I'm just saying, if you're informal and you can build a relationship with people, often in a negotiation, they'll go extra in order to help you out. If they see you as a person first and a negotiator second, it's very important. Okay. In my experience, that's a very important point. Okay. Aggression. If somebody's going to be aggressive, I've already talked about it. Make sure it's not you. Normally, aggression starts by signaling. It's a spiral. One side says and the other side goes back, and then it builds up. Okay. The way you deal with aggression is by listening and paraphrasing. If someone's being really aggressive to you, okay, then you very gently repeat back to them what you're hearing them say, and check, am I understanding you right? As I've said to you before, it's a chance for you to get extra information. Number 6, don't follow their proposal with a counter proposal. Right? If they make a proposal, they want to know what you think of their proposal. They don't want, if they say 15, don't go back and say 20. Okay, say 15, am I hearing you right? You're saying 15, yeah? Okay, what's this I'd like to discuss? What's the basis of the 15? Discuss their proposal. Don't go in with a counter proposal. They don't want to hear a counter proposal. They want to hear what you think about their proposal. So discuss their proposal with a view to being able to question it and get the weakest kind of points and negotiate around the weakest points. You demonstrate back that you've heard what people are saying. Okay? It's the greatest compliment you can pay anybody, even your worst enemy. is to show them that at least you're hearing what they're saying. Try it, because it doesn't happen in normal life. I train executives in listening a lot. Okay, a lot. It's one of the biggest training things I do, is running little workshops where people have to paraphrase, do tasks and paraphrase. Do not start your sentences with yes, but. Start your sentence with yes, and it forces you to listen. It's real simple. You know, so don't yes, but people. Paraphrase. So what? Yes, and what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that right? Yeah. Yes, and well, what I'm thinking then is but, and then build on it. Negotiation is about what we agree on. It's not about fighting about what we disagree about. That's for the street. Okay, so you're listening for things that you can discuss and you can agree upon. Okay? I'm nearly done here. Number 8, you keep a record of what's been agreed. The written thing, I told you. And the final thing, come over a person first and negotiate a second. I would say, when you do these things, a good negotiator, when you see a good negotiator, this is my kind of metaphor for a negotiator, a good one. And that's, of course, the swan. When you see the swan on the lake...
Yeah, don't get too close.
No, I know they bite, huh? Or they can break your arm with the wing.
Oh my God.
But when you see a swan on a lake, above the water, when you look above the water, the swan is just gliding very peacefully, okay? But if you look under the water, the swan is actually quite busy. It's doing quite a lot of things, okay? So you should, if you come across, excuse me, can I ask you a question, please? This is something I'd like us to discuss. Those kinds of behaviors will make you seem very normal, very natural, very amateur, very normal sort of person, okay? It's not weak. But under the water, if you do these kinds of things, the things we're talking about here and here, then you're going to be extremely busy. Okay? So that's a kind of a potted lecture on how to be more effective. That should help you either in negotiating a second-hand car or in negotiating the start of a long-term business relationship. The other thing I assume with all my students is everybody I meet wants to be successful, and everybody I meet is doing the best they can with whatever they've got. One first assumption about all my students. And the second thing is, I expect to see you for the rest of my life at some point or another. So in other words, every business relationship I have or every professional relationship I have, I assume it's going to be a long-term one. Okay, so it's, and that really gives me a win-win kind of spirit, and it also opens me. I'm not afraid of you, because I know that actually I want to do a deal that's good for you and good for me. You know what I mean? So it's, that's a very good win-win spirit. But even so, if they're trying win-lose, if you really feel that they're trying to get you, then I think what I've just told you should enable you to at least defend yourself and defend the people that you're representing. Some good basic stuff, all right? That's the end of the lecture that I wanted to give you. Thank you very much indeed.